Hello and welcome along to the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your host, Zayn Nabbi. Joining me today, we are everywhere you need to be in African football. We're in Yaoundé. We are in Johannesburg, although I think he might be Pretoria. He's too cool to say that. And we have Praia. And if you're South African, we're all praying. We're all praying right now. Hello, Francis Nkwain. Hello, Alasdair Howorth. Hello, Lorenz Köhler. Welcome to Africa's Biggest Bride. There's so much to get into. Guys, honestly, this is, I think, the first time we've had everyone up in different locations. And it's a pleasure to see the length and breadth of the continent through the squares. Francis, once again, doing his best to be the most good looking and the most urbane. Ali doing his best to show that he's a road warrior and will go anywhere in the world for a football story. And look at Lorenz. He's just so chic, so cool, so young, so trendy, so influencer. You boys look fantastic. I hope everyone is good. And of course, I'm in London. And in today's show, we're going to be starting off in Cabo Verde with that amazing game against Libya and the 3-3 draw. Lots to get into there. We'll talk about the permutations and why Francis might have a little bit of hope about his team qualifying, although might need a favor from Eswatini. Love holidaying there, beautiful country. And then I know Lorenz and every South African out there are trembling in their boots for the next two games. Not because they don't believe their team can win, but this is the time when boys become men. And we'll see who'll be making their way to the USA. And of course, we'll give a nod to Egypt, who qualified, and talk a little bit about what we can expect from them. But Alasdair, you are in Praia. Why are you there, brother? Tell us.
Zayn, I was here to witness the qualification to the World Cup for the first time of Cabo Verde, but then they went and didn't qualify, so we're on hold for another few days. Let me tell you, it was such a funny day yesterday because we were trying to find. I'm here with another journalist, and we were trying to find somewhere to watch the game. We're like, okay, where's this big screen gonna be set up? And everyone in Cape Verde, they're just so chill. Everyone was like, oh, like there'll just be a bar somewhere. There was no like big screen, no stress, no anxiety. Everyone was just going about their day. Then we start watching the game, and again, we start watching the game at this bar. There's maybe like five, 7 people. By the end of the game, there was like 100 people. Everyone's crowded around the screen. Everyone is stressed out of their mind because we witnessed one of the wackiest games I've ever seen with Cape Verde drawing 3-3 in Libya. First of
So,
all,
I mean, 6 goals, controversy. I mean,
yeah,
this sounds like everything you want in an African Cup of
the
Nations,
game,
not an African Cup of
yeah,
Nations, a World Cup qualifier, rather.
the game had everything. Own goal in the first 4 minutes against Cabo Verde. Then they pull it back. Then Libya score again with a lovely goal. Then they score an absolute screamer. Like if you haven't seen the highlights of this game, you need to look it up. Like
Oh, I
30
have it.
yard free kick, top corner, like superb. Then Cape Verde scored the most ludicrous goal because they just play the ball up front. It's an overhit pass. Ball is rolling. Libyan goalkeeper goes to pick it up. It rolls through his legs. And this, let me remind you, they're 3-1 down at this point before this goal goes in. And Libya had hit the bar, hit the post. Like Cape Verde were all over the place. There was so much chaos. Like they'd lost their heads completely. But that goal just switched everything. Then Cape Verde suddenly are hammering. They score with 8 minutes left. Then in the 7 minutes of added time, they have two one-on-ones, which the keeper redeems himself fully. They have one header cleared off the line. Then in the 97th minute, they have this offsides goal, which on looking back on it, for me is definitely not offsides. It was a
Whoa.
tight call, but I don't think it was offsides. But anyway, it was a 4-on-1. First of all, Libya allowing a 4-on-1 in the 97th minute was amazing. But the funniest thing about that is we were watching the game, right? And this is classic. Lawrence, I'm sure will remember this from the AFCON is we're watching the game, but in the background behind us, there's guys listening to the game on the radio, and they're like 15 seconds ahead of us. So everything that's happening, we're getting a bit of information before it happens. So say for instance the equalizer, everyone already was celebrating because we already knew they were going to score because these guys on the radio were jumping up. But then what happened with that offsides goal is the guys listening on the radio, they thought that there was a goal. So they started celebrating, so everyone starts celebrating before there's even the one-on-one, even the chance that they have to score. So everyone is celebrating before we even score. And what that means is everyone missed that they called it offsides. So it took us like a full like 90 seconds for people to realize what happened. Everyone's dancing. Because we're in the central square here in Praia. So everyone is running, celebrating, and then everyone's realizing like, oh my days, like we actually haven't scored. And then the game ends, and it was just everything you could possibly want from a football match.
I mean, I got to ask the question, right? Because I'm watching it on TV. I mentioned this off podcast to Lorenz and to Francis. That goal, right? I mean, should I be suspicious of anything more than other than this being a calamity?
I think there's nothing to be suspicious about Zayn because it was shocking, and I will say that. But I will say Awuheshi has been superb in other games. He saved Libya a few
Mhm.
times. He has been good for them, and in this game alone, he more than redeems himself with particularly a couple of those late chances. I think was it Arcanjo who had a one-on-one at the end, and he makes this amazing dive where he dives almost early, but then flicks his leg up and blocks it. So I don't think we should be calling foul too much of Libya. And I mean, they were devastated because obviously, we've talked about this group before, and talked about how much of a lifeline this is for Francis. But Libya were still in a chance for qualifying as well if they had won. So they kind of were throwing everything at it. Obviously, coached by Aliou Cisse, they have improved
Mm.
a lot under him. So there was no reason for them to not kind of be going for it full throttle. I think it was just a shocking mistake. And the bounce of the ball didn't help. It was a terrible pitch. But I'm not making excuses for him. But I don't think there was anything more to it than just an absolute howler.
Okay, let me ask you another question. I mean, this is surely in the bag for Cabo Verde because they have Iswatini that they play next at home in Praia. Um, I would imagine that I mean, Iswatini are bottom of the qualification group. This should be a shoe-in for them qualifying. Presuming Cameroon win, and we'll get Francis in a second, then they would probably enter the playoffs. But I mean, this is almost like celebrations put on ice.
Yeah, that is the sense here is that like no one is stressed. Actually, we bumped into the president of the federation yesterday who wasn't in Libya, which I just point out a football federation of a country not being at potentially the qualifying game. I was very surprised. But he was very calm. Everyone here is very calm. But I would say let's not underestimate the Siswasini side. They drew 2-2 with Angola. Your man, I was a Justice Figueiredo, the Chipa United boys scoring a brace. So I think this is what the Cabo Verdeans, certainly maybe not the players, but the fans here were guilty of against Libya is everyone here was so confident they were going to beat Libya. But as we all know, Libya is no easy game, particularly in North Africa. Like when they're at home, when they're in Tripoli, when they're in Benghazi, these are a serious team. So I think that definitely played into it. I think they were overconfident. So I think some of that will creep in. I think it'll be a nervous game actually until they can score. But yeah, of course, Eswatini are the whipping boys of this group. I mean, they're even below Mauritius. So it should be job done. Everyone here is very confident, and I'm very hopeful because if they don't qualify, I've wasted a lot of time and a lot of money because a lot of people won't pay me to report on Cape Verde almost qualifying for the World Cup. So I'm very happy with that.
I mean, there would be a story, right? There would be the second smallest nation to ever qualify for a FIFA World Cup after Iceland. Is that right?
Yeah, and second smallest by population, but Iceland, I feel like that stat does Cape Verde a bit of injustice because Iceland is yes, it's a couple hundred thousand people smaller than Cape Verde in terms of population. Iceland is one country or one island. Sorry, Cabo Verde is eight inhabited islands and another two uninhabited islands. Iceland's landmass, just that one island, is 20 times bigger than all of the Cabo Verdean islands put together. Santiago, the island that I'm on, which has the capital Praia, is smaller than Paris. Like this is the scale we're talking about. This entire island, the biggest one in this country, is smaller than Paris. This is the kind of scale we're talking about in terms of what we're looking at. Okay, for instance, I'll tell you a story. Yesterday, the we me and my colleague were going around. We went into this little kiosk shop, started chatting to the owner. It turned out he'd lived in America for a few years. We had a good conversation. Then we bumped into him later, so we thought, okay, let's go buy some water from his kiosk. So we went, started chatting. Then we saw some pictures on the wall of some football teams. So we asked, like, oh, what's going on here? And the other shop guys turned to us and said, oh no, he's the president of Academica de Praia, the team that just is the national champions of the Capo Verdean league. So we just bumped into the national champions president, who happens to also just be a guy who runs a kiosk in a shop. This is the top flight in Cape Verde. This is the kind of scale of what we're talking about. So for them to qualify for the World Cup, it's so much more impressive than Iceland. It's so much more impressive in terms of what they have access to in terms of resources.
But what I will say is what Iceland don't necessarily have that they have is, if I'm correct, I think 18 players during qualification have come from the diaspora. Does that sound about right, Ali?
Yeah. That and that's in Cabo Verde they say the diaspora is the 11th island of Cabo Verde. Like there's three times as many more of Cabo Verdeans living abroad than there are people living on the islands. It's an immigrant country. It was built on immigration. Obviously, a worse kind of immigration back in the day. It was a big Portuguese slave port, but yeah, that is just kind of at the heart of what it is to be Cabo Verdean is to kind of be immigrants, to be people who move around and bring that Cabo Verdean culture with them. I mean, and it's really interesting, right? Because you would think it's actually the Portuguese that have the most, but in this last international break, I think there's more people. I think there were 6 or 7 called up for the national team who were born in Rotterdam, which
So in the
and more
Netherlands.
than yeah, but not just the Netherlands, Rotterdam, more than there were even Portuguese-born players, which I just think is crazy that you have this like one relatively small city in Central North Europe, and it provided like a third of the team for Cabo Verde. Like that's crazy. But anyways, yeah,
No,
it's
wonderful.
been an amazing story.
That's a great deep dive into Cabo Verde, and I'm sure Ali, you'll be writing more on that. But Francis, I mean, indomitable lions of blue sharks. Where are you hedging your bets for direct World Cup qualification on Sunday?
Well, we're now at the stage where we don't need to be diplomatic. I want Cape Verde to draw at home and Cameroon goes through. So it's that simple for me. All this beautiful story he's just shared now about this small island nation that will be a beautiful romantic story. I need an African team turning up in the World Cup that's going to do the business. And that's Cameroon right now, as far as I'm concerned, in my group. Um, Yesterday, I was actually out hoping for a draw in Tripoli because I kind of want where we are now, like a bit of nerves, a bit of apprehension, maybe some doubts to seep in, because after they beat Cameroon, um, it was celebrated like it was job done. And I remember I have a lot of Capo Verdean friends, and I was saying to them, I was like, there's still 6 points to play for. And yes, you may just need another three, I think it was at the time, we were saying like three would guarantee them going through. And yes, if they win at home, there's nothing we can do any which way. But even then, you got this feeling of like, well, we'll go to Tripoli, we'll beat Tripoli, we'll beat Libya. And I'm saying it's Aliou Cisse. It's like this guy came with a mission to see if there's potential. So I was more coming from the point of if Libya do well, they're right up our backside. And we were already not even in contention when they were beating Cabo Verde yesterday. We had dropped into third at some point in time during the game when we were just drawing 0-0. And that's why I was concerned. I was kind of like, if they share the spoils, and then we can hope, maybe against all odds, that for some reason, one or another, maybe some nerves, maybe exactly what Eswatini did yesterday against Angola, they would just turn up and say, well, this is our World Cup final, and maybe we will stop you from going in. History will remember us for that. We still have to beat Angola when they turn up here, who have also been in sensational form. So it's not a shoe in by any regard. But the game yesterday, for me, I think our coach was being unnecessarily experimental in the first half. And it was kind of like, you want to say, well, get the job done. And then you can say, okay, let's rest the guys who I may need on Monday against Angola. But he started off with a different team that didn't seem to be at the races. And at halftime, he introduced a player who I love, basketball. He brought maybe the prerequisite energy that was needed, and all of a sudden they just looked just a little bit more adventurous. By the time Buemo was also coming on, I mean, and think about it, this is places like Buemo and Zambo and Gisa, and they were on the bench.
What was
And
going on with that?
Yes, I mean we were all. I mean everybody. Like I was doing live commentary on television for it, and when we got the team sheet coming through, like we were already broadcasting, and like nobody could express their true opinions live on television, and we were all trying to be like quite composed. And then I remember they cut off to ads. Everybody was like, what happened here? Like,
What's
what
going
exactly?
on?
Are these guys injured, or is it's the weirdest thing? And so, yes, again, you get the results, and it kind of like masks the fact that we're not playing well. We don't travel well. So the only plus we have is that they got those 3 points, and now we're playing at home where we're undefeated in over 50 years. So you kind of like go, okay, we may have a chance, but my fear is even in the top seconds chart, um, kind of like South Africa, bizarrely, um, it's not a given. So even if we end up second in our groups, South Africa or Cameroon, you have teams like Burkina Faso who are in with a shout. You've got teams like Madagascar, yet another small nation that are in with a shout. They're doing their business. They won again yesterday. They still sit above, I think they sit above Cameroon, actually. So you've got teams like Gabon, a relatively small nation. Yes, I mean, we all know Gabon, but Gabon is 1.5 million people. So they are one of those countries that have been punching way above their weight for years. And they're in there with the DRC and with, so all of a sudden you're going like, it's only four of these countries that will make that second space. And if we're not working on our goal difference and all these other things, um, we could maybe still end up second on Monday and still not make the knockout phase or that mini tournament that they have set up. So there's a lot riding on it. There's a lot of apprehension, but there's something crazy about Cameroonians. They believe in a way that it almost it's hard to explain. You speak with the average Cameroonian, they're kind of like, oh no, but we're gonna be at the World Cup. And I know when I speak with my Senegalese friends, they like the former players. A lot of them used to say that was one thing they never understood about Cameroonian players. Like they seem to have this mentality, like we'll get it done. And they're almost just saying, we're going to play here in Yaoundé on Monday night. We can't play on Sunday because we have national elections on that day. So FIFA has given permission for our game to be moved to the Monday. So all of a sudden, you almost, I don't know, we will already have known the last results and kind of like know what you have to do, including maybe even your score line that you may have to get to be able to make that last if let's say we were going for second, it will be playing on the Monday night as opposed to the Sunday night with everybody else. Because of the elections, they have these non-movement things on election days, or across most African countries, in which way we kind of like so you can't have 80,000 people gathering at a, a stadium for a game whilst you're trying to man polling stations. And in case that game doesn't go right, you could quite easily have a manifestation on your hands. So they've gotten permission to move it to the Monday. So yesterday, a lot of us were actually routing and going, hoping for a draw. And when that happened, it was cool. So we weren't so happy when Libya were 3-1 up. It was kind of like, oh, now they could get a whole energy going, and we were drawing 0-0 at the time. So in the end, I know I will go and look at the goals again. Maybe it's that Cameroonian thing. We just focus on ourselves, and I think that's where we really are as a nation. We know we have to get the 6 points. It's not in our control any which way. So we'll get the 6 points if we can, and then look up and see where that leaves us. So there we
There we
go.
go. There we go. Francis, Ali, thank you for wrapping us. So much drama in that group. I'm glad we gave it the time that it deserves. But before we go to Lawrence and South Africa, I want to hit the mailbag and just remind people out there, please let us know what you think. OTW underscore podcast. That's where you'll find us on TikTok, on X, on Facebook, not Facebook, on YouTube, on Facebook. You will find us at the On the Whistle podcast group, so do search for that. So yeah, please, whatever platform you're on, we are there. Meet us, greet us, share, post a comment. We love to hear from you. So as we move in to talk about South Africa and what will happen next after their points deduction, I had some comments in relation to last week's podcast with Ali and with Francis. So we will hit the mailbag. So, excuse me, we had Peace Nation say, such a quality conversation. And I agree with both points raised by Francis and Ali. Though, given the history of gross incompetence at SAFA, Ali is right that this warrants drastic structural change at SAFA. They tend to mask admin failures with on field success. That said, if Bafana fail to decisively beat Rwanda and Zimbabwe at home, we have no reason to cry about the World Cup, where the stakes and pressure are much higher. We had Airport Air Force say South Africa is going to the World Cup, point blank, period. We had Daniel Ledeme say, let's not forget it's football, anything can happen. We had Golani Kala say, Nigerians only have to worry about qualifying teams to represent Africa, not fight the progress of Bafana. Nigeria, it will depend if Benin and Nigeria dethrone them. We have Patrick Köhler Matthew say, pray South Africa do not lose any of their matches because Nigeria will win their remaining two matches. And finally, we have Ola dot 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 011 say, I think South Africa gets 4 points in the next window. Rwanda will be tough. SA eventually qualifies as winners of the group. Well, listen, Lorenz, it's time to get you in there because I've been speaking to my friends, my family, and other journalists in South Africa, and I have a confidence that Bafana are going to do it. But people at home are now making me worried that Benin can do it. I mean, where do you sit on this one, my friend? And I think
Sorry,
you
I
got,
was just mute. I was just muting myself. Yeah.
don't worry.
Um. Oh, it's a funny thing. Like if you look at the outlook of the entire qualification system, in the first round of fixtures there were some surprises. I feel some of the bigger teams then got some form, but now I think we're at the stage where the pressure and the stakes are so high. We're going to see a couple of other surprises. Like it wouldn't surprise me if Francis's crazy dream of all the results going their way in Cameroon, go on top. And like in other groups, I can also foresee some crazy things happening because of pressure. Um, and the reason why I'm saying that is because I feel like Benin somehow is gonna get two victories, and that is
Whoa,
my
whoa, whoa.
concern.
That's bold, right? You think Gernot
Yeah,
Rohr can get two victories? Really?
I I do feel that they're well capable of doing that. They
Oh, wait,
probably
wait. They're
one.
going to go beat Nigeria. This is what you're saying.
Look, I've watched Benin. They don't play pretty football, but somehow they can grind these results out somehow. And I feel like they're the one team that look at this and say they have nothing to lose. You know what I mean? They're gonna go in it, give their all, and play that mud football that we see in CAF Champions League that ends up winning titles in this competition. So that is my concern. I don't really have much of a concern that South Africa can't do the business at home against Zimbabwe and Rwanda. I think Rwanda has been terrible travelers in general. Um, and the result that they got against us, they actually, I think the only team that's beaten us in this qualification system, it was, if you remember, it was a game on an artificial surface that was waterlogged.
Mm.
It was a horrific game, like it was at amateur level.
But this is also a
But
team that draws with Zimbabwe and struggles to beat them. So like, where does this does your concern come more because it's pressure and it's going to do funny things to Nigeria and who Benin are playing? They're playing Rwanda, right? That's their other game.
yeah, I think yeah they're playing yeah
Yeah,
Rwanda
they're away in Rwanda.
and then Rwanda and then South Africa. Yeah. So yeah, um, Benin's just been one of those funny teams for me that you look at them when they play and they're like, this team is really not that good. They don't. have much going for them, but they somehow managed to grind out these results. Um, but yeah, I think in general, South Africans are the team in particular, are very positive. The players in midweek, like Yaya Sitole is back in the team after his broken leg. He was like saying that they had like an internal meeting amongst each other to say, you know, it's a terrible situation that we're in now, but what's done is done. We just need to take initiative because, like this is, a once in a lifetime opportunity, like literally. We haven't qualified for a World Cup in the qualification process in 24 years. We obviously not taking into account 2010 World Cup. So yeah, it's a big deal for them, and they feel that they will get the job done. I mean, we're on a run of like 20 plus games unbeaten, so that's not the issue. The concern is the other side.
Lawrence, I want to ask a couple questions. One, is there any conversation in South Africa about like almost not even being bothered by the Benin results because you're in a position where you're playing two teams that you could, in theory, absolutely hammer and just run up the goal difference. So then you'd be in a place where kind of because Benin, even if they beat Rwanda and Nigeria, they're unlikely to beat them by more than one or two goals, and you're only one goal behind them in goal difference. So like, is there any conversation about like actually we could just smash Zimbabwe 5-0 and then beat Rwanda 1 or 2-0 and we'll actually be fine. And then the second thing is, are we gonna be seeing some full stadiums in South Africa? Because I'm sick of these qualifiers in South Africa often just being in, I don't know, Moses Madiba or something and being empty. And then the next week I'm
Well,
seeing these rugby championship games being packed out for in the same stadiums. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions.
Yeah, look, it was a bit weird that, for example, the Nigeria game wasn't sold out, but the previous games, Bombela, um, Polokwane, Cape Town, like the end of the AFCON qualifiers, we were having sold out, sold out, sold out, sold out. So it was a bit weird for me to see the last two games not sold out. I do feel like potentially Bombela, which will be the final game, will definitely be, packed. I'm not so sure about Mabida.
Urban Lights
It's
will
obviously
come
These
out.
these Durban guys, these
They'll come
Durban guys,
out.
huh?
They'll come out.
Always letting us down.
I don't know if we'll sell out, but we'll come out. Look, if it's Chiefs or Pirates or a Cup final, we're there,
it's
right?
sold out. It's sold
Right.
out. Yeah, I
So
feel like look, there is some hint of like, because there's not a dominant representation of Chiefs players, that maybe there's less excitement from a majority of the fan base. But I don't think it should be that way. I think the lack of marketing, you'll find on match day, we often on social media say, "Hey, we playing today." You can catch it on SABC One, and people are like, "Oh, we're playing today." You know what I mean? So there's like, yeah, there's not a real push, but there's always been a debate about this to say like, hey, if your club is not playing, your country is not play, your country is playing, so there shouldn't have to be a drive to market. But that's a debate for another day. But yeah, to answer your question, there actually hasn't been much chat about this thing of, the goal difference thing.
mm,
um it's obviously been more focused on how did we get to this point, like how have we been this incompetent. There were some articles in, like what you call it, these investigative journalists, talking about how members of the NEC is now trying to pressurize uh, the SAFA CEO to, do due diligence of saying like, why is this guy not going through, the team manager going through a disciplinary hearing, or like why we're not investigating how this happened. So there is being pressure put in within the NEC to say, hey, this guy should leave. There was also mention in the article that the former technical director who was pushed out of SAFA also placed like a lot of concern over how this guy holds this very important role in the national team. So there's been a lot of, off the field talk in the media and amongst the fan, rather than more focusing on the game. Um, if you ask the common fan to name you one Rwandan or Benin player, they wouldn't be able to do that. So, pre-match talk is definitely going to be limited. But yeah, there was also very split focus as well because of the under 20 World Cup. which we unfortunately got knocked out of last night. It was a very sad ending to what we thought was a very good generation of footballers. So yeah, so I think most of the chatter is going to begin from today onwards about these next two games.
Well,
Uh,
maybe that's where you could come in quite well, because what Ali speaks to is something that we kind of like alluded to the last time we were sitting around the braai. I was saying like one of the things I find with South African football is that at its fan base, dare I say, the few South African people with whom I speak with about football, it's become very intellectual almost. It's like, oh, what are we doing with our structure, our management, or but you need this effervescence. And like what Ali said, like and you highlighting afterwards, the fact that South Africa still is unable to recognize that they are still masters of their own destiny just by scoring goals. That should be the only conversation. And you don't hear it. And even on our plateau yesterday, we were talking about the different qualifying groups. And I was saying, like, look, the South Africans, all they need to do is like one 3-0 game and a 2-0 game somewhere from teams that they could get those results. And even if Benin did it 1-0 against Nigeria, they'd be super proud. They'd get their 3 points over there and they got another 2-0. It won't be enough for them to go, but they would make
Yeah,
it into the top four.
that's
And
it's a good point because you don't see Benin scoring more than two, three
no,
goals. Like
you
No,
that's
don't.
not
But
going to
you
no,
know
not
happen.
they
at
Yeah.
could
all.
get two 1-0s or two
Mm.
2-1s or 1-0 and a 2-1, and they might get the 6 points like you rightly said. But South Africa still have a control because they have the capacity, given the opposition that they have, to get one game. I know Ali said a 5-0, but I'm saying like go get a 3-0 somewhere and a 2-0
Yeah,
somewhere, and all of
so
a sudden you're good to go
to,
regardless of what Benin does.
yeah,
And
no,
I think that's a spirit or conversation that if the fan base understands, then they come out and become that 12th man, saying, okay, we don't just want the 3 points, we also want the goals. So they're also reminding the players sometimes if they're 1-0 up, that it's not good enough. And so those chants about we want more. But this also speaks to what I think is special about Benin right now, because where nations are also a reflection of sometimes how their structures and their teams perform. So Ali flies to Cape Verde because there's an energy around Cape Verde now that sees this as an opportunity for them to make their entrance into an international space, make a name for their nation in another way. Like they're known for other things, but here's them becoming part of this big football family. They have been a footballing nation for many years, but their government is backing it. Their citizens, their diasporas, and the people flying into Cape Verde to be a part of the celebrations on Sunday evening because of what it means to them. And but there's also the business of FIFA that is might also be looking and going, whilst we like Capo Verde, we want to sell tickets to games, and we don't know. So they may also be doing their own campaigns, but the effervescence of that nation is what gets them going. Benin is at this point where their own political leadership is bowing out. And speaking of a new generation of leadership, they just endorsed their new candidate for presidency. The guy's like 48 years old or something. The nation feels like it's coming into a new self, and they're galvanizing themselves around football to say, imagine if we come out and do our own coming out dance at the World Cup in North America with new political leadership, a new and a first participation at the World Cup and all of that. And then I was speaking to my South African friends, and they're just talking about their space, and I'm going like, connect to the energy and feed yourselves because you need something that makes the football become a reality. Like, and so if the conversations around and this is why I was talking about the responsibility of the media. Sometimes when we're just pointing about that administration and saying, I keep saying, but the media guys too could have said, we have a document here that shows that this player doesn't qualify, and asked them during the press conference that given X player is not available for selection, and maybe that might have reminded the guys. So sometimes it could also be somebody else is saying, if we score 6 goals, we are, and it reminds the people about what it is
Mhm.
they need to do. So that's why I said we're gonna start with you. Ali's giving you something, Lawrence. Go kick him. Go remind them.
Look. There's an interesting thing that you're touching on is like the focus on South African football has always been over the past more than a decade now has always been focusing on the negative, right? Whether we're doing well on the pitch, there's always going to be this taint of, the media focusing more on what's going wrong at SAFA and how far we've fallen behind, how we haven't taken that momentum from hosting a World Cup and a couple of AFCONs and a Chan and whatever. But generally, like, I think it hasn't been expressed enough how important qualifying for this World Cup will be
Hmm.
for South African football and SAFA. We all know that SAFA's coffers are completely like it's. They were even complaining internally about how the 200 and something thousand fine from the Tebogo Mokoena thing was stretching them. Can you believe that? They were complaining about the fine internally, not about the 3 points, right?
But the
So
truth is,
there was
most federations will make their money from participating in these tournaments. So, like you rightly pointed
exactly.
out, if South Africa hasn't done it for 24 years, that means your coffers have
Mm.
not received substantial capital. So, whilst we
But
might say, oh, how would a federation be saying that? It's the reality. You need to make these tournaments to have the money to be able to hire the staff, otherwise, you let them go, or to pay your fines.
yeah, there's something interesting that the reason why I'm bringing this up, I just want to get it up for you quickly, because I think that you guys will also find this quite interesting, given the fact that you're starting to cover more sporting codes. So on this page from one of my good friends, his name is Nobile. He does this, uh, sports financial content,
Hmm.
right? So he's broken down the 2024 revenues of the PSL, SAFA, Springboks, and CSA, right? The
Look at
total revenue, the total revenue for PSL is 1.043 billion for 2024
rands or
for
dollars.
rands.
Mhm.
For the Springboks, 1.55 billion revenue. For CSA, 1.89 billion in revenue for 2024, but that's due to the India tour as well that they
I know
had.
that's the biggest of the revenue so far.
Yeah, yeah. And then the revenue in 2024 for SAFA was 380 million rand. And he breaks it down to through broadcast rights, sponsorships, match revenue, grants, and then like merchandise and stuff like that. So SAFA had 380 million in revenue in 2024. So let's say we go to the World Cup. We get a new kit sponsor because we've had Lecoq, which has been nothing short of disastrous. Like I even put on my Bafana sweater before this podcast, and I just took it off. I was like, this thing's rubbish. Like the quality, the quality of the kits were horrific. Like nobody was buying the kits. Now we're potentially going to Adidas, which is going to be more money. Uh, we've got so many sponsors coming on board, like telecommunications companies and things, because they're smelling the mundial. They've been smelling the mundial, and once that ticket is confirmed, I can expect like it's going to be a completely different change, different energy. But then with that different energy, we must get rid of some people within those structures. So yeah, uh, putting aside the results this weekend, I just feel like the future of South African football, which has some positivity from the women's game and our junior national teams that are doing particularly well, there could be something really cooking for the future, which we then need to tell more of instead of just focusing on the politics and the negatives and all our shortcomings over the passing, and just say this is a turn of the corner for South African football, and we can look towards the Morocco, which we feel are now like the example, to where we should be funding into development, trying to get the diaspora like they're also getting, and move forward.
No,
Zayn,
that's
I appreciate we have to cut off, but I also just wanted to point out, and then this is why I asked about the goal difference thing. If there was any, ever, and I mean ever, any one country in the world that should be aware about goal difference qualifying for a World Cup or an Africa Cup of Nations, it should be Bafana. And that's why I was like, it blows my mind that that's not the conversation. I just want to put it out there for everyone right now. Goal difference is how it works. Pizzo, it's not head to head. You get the goal difference, you go through. Okay, we're not. I'm not having another repeat of 2011.
No, no, of course. And look, I think one of the interesting things is, this is my sort of final parting shot before we maybe do one question on Egypt and their qualification. Is I think Lorenz, as a South Africans, we're channeling a lot of hurt and pain here, right? Of seeing campaigns crash. So we're worried about buckling under the pressure. But I mean, Benin haven't been in this position. Nigeria are in a tight position. Rwanda in a tight position. So everyone's under pressure, right, to different degrees. And I can tell you now, the Nigerians are not going to go out there planning to lose against Benin because
For
it
sure.
ain't going to be a fun stadium to be in if the result doesn't go the Nigerian way, right? Like it just isn't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be if you're a
Yeah.
South African. It wouldn't be, what we saw with the Congolese fans when they lost and lost. It's not going to be a fun place to be in. And Nigeria are a super proud nation, and they need to at least give themselves a shot of coming through the back door somewhere to make it to the World
Look,
Cup.
a good point is that there is no possible way that they can finish in the runners-up group now.
Yes,
Nigeria. They have
Yeah.
to try and miraculously get into top spot, which is it's so weird to think of that now.
so they're not. They're everyone's under pressure in here, and I know we're channeling our greatest fears. But you were a young kid, and I was a little older than you, and Philemon Masinga sent that rocket in at Soccer City. It was about a year after Francis learned about Dr. Kamano. But but we'll channel out in a strength. But look, we're in extra time here, probably 7 minutes deep. But I do want to ask one question, so anyone in the group can pick it up. Egypt joining Tunisia, Morocco, and qualifying for the 2026 World Cup. Mo Salah will be there if he doesn't have an injury. I mean, does this tournament offer a little bit of redemption, given they didn't qualify for Qatar, and of course had a disaster in Russia in 2018?
My opinion is that Tunisia and Egypt go there to make up numbers. They'll come back home with either 3 or 1 point at the World Cup. AFCON is a different story, but these two teams, they generally they qualify for, okay, no, maybe not Egypt always, but Tunisia, they qualify through the World Cups. They do their eyes closed. And then they go there, and then there's some controversy before they go. They're fighting in the camp, and then boom, 1 point, and they're gone. I'd love to both of them to prove me wrong and have an exceptional campaign, but I do feel like the weather conditions being in North America and stuff, it's just not gonna favor these guys at all. But yeah, I would love to be proved wrong.
Francis?
Well, not first of all, I'd say congratulations to the Egyptians for joining the Moroccans and the Tunisians. It's always nice to know we have teams that, at least on paper, are competitive, representing our continent. If they get a good draw, I can see Morocco without question doing well. I can see Egypt. They have an interestingly new dynamic to their national team, and that's why I think the challenges they've had in the last two World Cups, not qualifying and not doing so well at the previous one, I think there is a hunger as a very proud nation to want to be able to do better. And a lot of their players now have gone into different types of clubs, to be honest. So now you have even like Omar, who's playing in the Premier League at Manchester City. Mamouche, these guys are now the the quality of the players that are playing backup, dare I say, or alongside the Salahs. The quality has upped a little bit, I think. I would love, like Lauren said, to have them put their good foot forward and do better than the we just turned up. Tunisia, they tend to be their own worst enemies very often. Again, it's usually more down to some infighting or some administrative stuff, and then all of a sudden you're hearing the players were up till 3 a.m. debating about something before a game, or and then they don't play as well as they could. But again, I still think these three countries that have qualified, we're sending 9 ambassadors for our continent. We want them to be 9 ambassadors who potentially could make it into the last 16s. And any one of these three teams, if they get their acts together, they could. If the group that we're drawn into was competitive enough to the standards that they have, they should be able to at least win one game, lose one, and draw one. 4 points usually takes you through to the next round. So if they're going into those next rounds and building their confidence and going along, we hopefully will see good representation for our continent. And that's where I would start at present.
Brilliant, gentlemen. Thank you for chopping it up. So much to get into, so much drama to look forward to. If Bafana don't make it, I am not on the next pod. Lorenz can host.
We need the prize. We need to say the prize.
Bye.
Big praise from Bahia. Big praise from
Oh,
Bahia.
Go on, Brian. Go, Ali. And Ali, unfortunately, I'm not saying that praia for you.
You're giving a very different one. A very, very different one.
Lawrence,
And
Ali,
I don't want to
Francis,
say
thank you
this,
for
but I'm really hurt that you were banking on them being successful and you already flew out there to celebrate with them. It's okay.
Francis,
It's
what you
okay.
don't know
It's all right.
is tomorrow my flight is coming to Yaoundé. Don't worry, I'm flying down to Yaoundé
You can
tomorrow.
come
So
on
I'll see
Monday,
you there.
the day after the
For the
celebratory
aftermath.
party.
No, it's for the aftermath.
For the after
Exactly.
party, right?
Gentlemen, we wish you well. Thank you for joining Africa's Biggest Bride. Ciao for now.